Hi, everyone. It's Katie Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. Welcome back, or welcome if you are new here. So, I apologize for the delay. Usually, each week I try and get on here and talk about our weekly newsletter. I have been delayed sharing the February 4th, 2026 newsletter. I was at Stargard's camp, which is a conference. I've been on a cruise ship. I'm still on a cruise ship, just making some difficult and challenging decisions with work and trying to keep on top of everything. So I do appreciate your patience in the delay getting this up and posted. We don't have a newsletter today. Today is Wednesday, February 11th. We will be back with a regular newsletter next week, which is Wednesday, February 18th. And then we will be back on our regular schedule until, the Christmas holidays. So let's take a look now at the February 4th weekly newsletter. I'm going to pull that up here on the screen. In case you're new here, each week I talk about our weekly newsletter. I share some context about why I included the news stories that I included and what I was thinking about the different articles and why I think they're important to aquatic industry professionals. You can access the complete newsletter in the description box down below. Please do consider subscribing so you receive the newsletter in your inbox each and every week. The newsletter is comprised of a couple of different components. So it always starts out with an op-ed with something I've been or realized or something that is very urgent and critical. Then we go into the weekly news for the aquatic or swimming pool industry that we're not able to share on Facebook. And then we usually round out the newsletter with some announcements or new videos on our YouTube channel. So as I shared at the top of the video, been in Florida and cruising the last 2 weeks, essentially for Stargard Elite's annual conference, which they call camp. It takes place at the beginning. So this year, the cruise camp took place February 2nd to February 7th, 2026. And that is what precipitated kind of the delay in trying to record this newsletter on cruise Wi-Fi and having a quiet enough environment to talk about the newsletter. But my travel to Florida for camp actually precipitated the start of the newsletter because the weather in Florida was unseasonably cold when I arrived at the end of January. And that included arriving at my hotel and discovering that the night clerk at the front desk, they had brought indoors a outdoor gas heater that you would typically associate with the patio of a restaurant. And this is quite dangerous, but it is not unsurprising that somebody, when they're cold and they're unable to focus, may not have realized that that type of equipment would be dangerous in an indoor setting. Thankfully, the gas heater wasn't turned on, but that was the impetus at the start of the newsletter, was really getting aquatic professionals thinking about moments where we make bad decisions, including when we're cold. You could also extend this to the practice that some people call HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or you're unable to. And we can see this happen a lot in the aquatic as well, where if the tools are not present or the conditions are not correct, employees who may not have formed good judgment or may not have good training or they may not have good decision-making skills, they may make a bad decision spontaneously with deadly consequences. And so my main takeaway for everyone this week from the newsletter is I want you to consider some of the pathways in your workplace, some of the routine tasks that your staff does, and how different weather conditions or environmental circumstances like rain or snow can impact their effectiveness and their safety. So, for example, if people are transporting things from outside to inside on slippery sidewalks and you're not providing, shoe cleats or winter boots or salt and sand, there could be a slip, trip, and fall while unloading or moving a chemical delivery order or something like that. And these things may seem small initially, but they can evolve into really big workplace injury claims. They can also evolve into things that we should just anticipated because weather does change throughout the year, and how is our team prepared for the workplace. I'm not going to talk in this video about the Stargard Camp, the conference. It has been a phenomenal experience. I did record a vlog that I'll be posting on our YouTube channel in the next couple of weeks. I am absolutely slammed by work right now, which is not necessarily new or abnormal, but I have reached a critical point with a staffing situation that I'm going to have to resolve and get more help. So I do appreciate your patience as non-critical things are just not getting moved through the system as quickly as possible. So I don't know when that will be posted on our YouTube channel, but it is going to be in queue to get edited and posted as soon as possible. Also, in the February 4th, 2026 newsletter, I shared this free swim taking place in Estevan, Saskatchewan, where they're going to dye the water pink. I asked about this on Facebook and got a number of replies from other aquatic professionals who said that this was a pretty routine thing that they did at their commercial municipal facilities. I've never done anything like this personally. The only time I've used dye was in association with a circulation test, like a dye test, and that special dye that is formulated for the swimming pool, but not for people to swim in it. So I'd be really curious to hear any of you who have done similar types of activities, whether for Valentine's Day, Halloween, Easter. There were several different events that came up, but this was totally new to me to use dye in a public swim. Moving into the news portion of the weekly newsletter, I decided that I was not going to reshare any more information about the recent chemical incident at the Canmore Inn and Suites until we have conclusive information that is actually constructive and helps us to understand what actually happened in that incident. Because every news article that I've read in the last week to 10 days has been continuing to rehash the same points without adding any new information. There's no new information that I've seen, including in the AHS, Alberta Health Services enforcement orders. Those were posted on the AHS enforcement order portion of the website. I will be linking to those in our upcoming February 18th newsletter. But until now, there still have not been any further updates of any meaningful quality. That's why I'm not resharing all of the trash that I'm seeing about this story on the internet. This week was a little bit lighter in terms of the volume of stories, but it did have a widespread in terms of the types of stories. And a few that really stuck with me was a shift in rental bookings in the city of Denver, Colorado. It's very important when you read the news as a person, or I read the news as a consultant. I'm using critical thinking to make sure I'm going past the headline and reading the entire article. The headline of this first article that I shared in a newsletter was somewhat inflammatory. Denver's queer swim team is splashing back after the city displaced them. If you're not thinking clearly, or if you don't read the news article, you might think that this is some sort of political thing where the queer swim team is no longer allowed to rent pool space. But it does appear that this changes for all rental groups in Denver, Colorado. It's irrespective of the group type or the rental group. And so I think that's really important to lead with the facts. And if something improper is done, then we comment on it. But in this situation, the city is making changes to their rental policies, and one group is perhaps disproportionately affected. It's hard for them to find replacement pool space, but this is not some sort of bias against a particular user group. I also shared a news article pertaining to a business that is fined in the UK for a drowning fatality where a child was underneath an inflatable in the pool. And this is something that we've continued to see again and again and again over the last 10 to 15 years in aquatics in general. When I first moved to Alberta in essentially 2013, early 2013, There had recently been a number of drowning fatalities in the city of Edmonton, and one included a child who had been upright underneath a piece of equipment in the pool. They were not visible, and they drowned underneath that equipment. It can also be really hard with these foam toys or play mats. There can be some suction with the surface water tension, and it's really hard if you're not a strong person or an adult to break that tension, that suction, and push the equipment away. And so, this is one of the main reasons why in lifeguarding classes that I teach, I would always tell my candidates to remove any equipment that's floating around that's not being used during public swim, because it clutters up the surface and it makes it harder to see what's happening in the water underneath. Certainly, if somebody's playing with a piece of equipment, we don't need to take it out of the water, but generally speaking, we do need to be aware that any type of toy, mat, inflatable equipment that is blocking visibility can also be forcing something under the surface or making it hard for them to breathe or get out of the get up to breathe. I'm continuing to follow this lawsuit from Texas regarding the 12-year-old girl who drowned in a scuba diving lesson. This is very concerning in terms of the fact it is adjacent to water safety. Scuba diving is obviously not exactly the same conditions as a public swim or being out in the lake or boating, but the same protocols and precautions do need to apply. And there have been some really sad details coming out about this case, including alleging that the dive instructor might have worked a triple shift. So this was not the case where the class started at 9 a.m. and the instructor was well rested. The allegation is that they came off of an overnight security shift following an all day long daytime shift. And so for myself, what limited scuba instruction I've received is very detail focused and would be very, it's important to have a clear mind and be thinking clearly, because the safety and the risk when you're diving underwater is, it just takes one mistake to have a fatal accident. Other articles I shared this week were regarding increasing training opportunities in Ontario by hosting lifeguard and swim instructor training that is credit eligible for high school students, to give them the opportunity to do a school type of placement at the pool to earn uh, high school credits as well as workplace employment opportunities by doing programs like the Bronze Medallion, Bronze Cross, Assistant Lifeguard, National Lifeguard, First Aid Instructor, First Aid training, etc. Also shared some articles regarding illegal drain covers, and this is something we've seen repeatedly. I discussed this with Allison Petrie of Abby's Hope Foundation. She's routinely on Amazon looking for illegal drain and suction outlet covers. There is a thriving market where it's often whack-a-mole, that one listing gets taken down only to be replaced by another, whereby there are unscrupulous companies or vendors who are making these drain covers and asserting certain standards that they don't actually meet, which could then result in a horrible incident of entrapment if the correct equipment is not installed. I shared a news story about an incident where a hotel owner was murdered in a fit of rage by somebody who didn't want to pay for a pool pass. That was really upsetting. I shared a student's workplace school project pertaining to their experience at the pool. So, Pool Time Memories inspires secondary student to do a lifeguard capstone project, like at the end of high school. I shared a drowning incident in a mikveh in Jerusalem. This was really interesting to me because mikveh are not typically very deep. There were no photos of this mikveh, so this one could be quite deep. But a mikveh is a ritual cleansing pool in Jewish life. It is visited at certain times of the month or certain times of the year, and is not typically like a huge swimmable basin. It is more of a plunge pool. The ones I've seen were quite small, quite shallow, but it will be interesting to get more details about this type of incident, because in general, it is something that people do need to be aware of. In general, that water safety is an issue at all times. I shared some articles about underwater hockey, the announcement out of Mexico that a judge was halting construction on Royal Caribbean's destination, Perfect Day Mexico, near Costa Maya, that there needs to be further, I believe it was environmental investigation needs to be done. A pool in West Virginia received FEMA funds in order to rebuild from damage it had sustained during recent flooding. Laurentian, the university in Northern Ontario near Sudbury, where the pool was closed during the pandemic due to it's reached the end of its life cycle, that respectfully, that dead horse is being beaten again, and the study is showing that it will cost at least $25 million to reopen that Olympic pool. I believe in pools, I believe in swimming, but I do question the responsible nature, if it's responsible to invest that kind of money in aging infrastructure. I don't know the Laurentian pool specifically. I haven't been there myself personally, but it does cause questions in terms of, is it appropriate to spend that kind of money on aging infrastructure in a specific community? Could that money be better served on a small new pool, other pools, different infrastructure like spray parks or splash pads? I don't have the answer, and the community is the one who should be making those decisions. But I do worry about throwing good money after bad. I shared a remarkable story of a team who was swimming for 4 hours at least to try and save their family, lost at sea in Australia. And then I shared a bit of a laugh. I was contacted by someone recently who was involved in a pool project, and this is what was sent in terms of the schematic, so to speak, for the project. This is not going to be a schematic that any officer of public health can sign off on, but every day is entertainment when you're a consultant, right? There's good days, there's bad days, and there's always days where you see things that you've never seen before. The end of the newsletter, we shared the recording. Thank you to everybody who's watched it regarding the Canmore Inn and Suites incident, which took place at the end of January. My work has really been busy in response to this. There's been a lot of inquiries for certified pool operator training, a lot of panic from organizations wondering what happened and how they can prevent this. So I thank you all for your interest in making your pools safer. It's just created a really challenging couple weeks where we're working as fast as we can to get everything out that everyone needs. But that is definitely one of the reasons why this recording of the newsletter has been delayed until now. So thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you watching to the end. If you have any comments, please feel free to pop them in the comment box below. Subscribe so that you will get these updates as the videos come out. And we will see you next week, February 18th, for our regular weekly newsletter. Bye for now.